Welcome back to the Bitcoin Brothers Australia podcast. You are watching episode 7, and we are very, very lucky tonight. We have the great man, Big Pete, as he calls himself.
It's me.
Peter Appla. Thanks.
PJ Appla to some.
PJ Appla.
Yep, that's right. That's right.
Thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure.
I've done a little bit of research. You don't know this, but I've done a little bit of research today just to who is Peter Appla? How can we introduce you on the podcast? So bear with me here, and if anything is wrong, just let me know at the end. All right.
Definitely. Yep.
So I've got a partner and managing director of Lionfoot Ventures.
Yes, that's true.
That's true. You're a standout entrepreneur with over 20 years of experience.
Yes.
You founded the Australian Stock Report in 2002 with only $30,000, growing it into one of Australia's leading stock market advisory and education providers.
That's me.
I
fluked it.
That's
all the money I had.
That is incredible. So according to Grok, and you might shoot me afterwards for saying this, but according to Grok, you've turned that company into at least a $10 million company.
That sounds about right.
That sounds about right.
Yep.
And it says here that you just have an incredible knack for turning around companies in financial distress, boosting sales and profitability. You are someone who has created iconic brands. Now, this is pretty awesome. So, Australian Spirit MasterCard.
Yes.
The 3 Bearz Kids animation series.
Yes, sir.
Quizopia online puzzle platform.
Yes.
That's you.
That's me.
And JT Goldberg Global Investment Fund.
Yep. Sounds incredible.
That's quite a resume.
Sounds like I've been busy. Sounds like perception. It's pretty good.
That is quite an incredible resume. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and I certainly can't wait to get stuck into your journey, because it is a fascinating one already just by doing a bit of research and going through that. We'll start with our Bitcoin news. It has been an incredible week or two in Bitcoin. We've had some crazy things happening in the US, as we've shared over our last few episodes.
Yep.
One of the biggest things I think that's happened over the last week is I've spoken about this person called Howard Lutnick.
Right.
Now, he is the Cantor Fitzgerald CEO, and he has been confirmed officially as the Secretary of Commerce in the United States. Now, it keeps getting more interesting. So companies just released their Q4 filings from the end of last year.
Right.
His company bought over $1 billion worth of MicroStrategy shares. Now, MicroStrategy only buy Bitcoin. That's what they do. So we'll talk about them all through every podcast episode, because they're always in the news, but they just buy Bitcoin.
Right.
And it's a different way of purchasing Bitcoin, is you just buy shares basically in their company instead.
Mm-hmm.
So he is the Secretary of Commerce. Now, the reason why this is really big news is because he is in charge of America's sovereign wealth fund. So Trump has made him in charge of the sovereign wealth fund. And this guy, in the last week, being in charge of the Sovereign Wealth Fund, has just released that his company has bought over $1 billion in MicroStrategy shares. 40%, they believe, of their company's net worth is now in MicroStrategy shares.
Now,
and this is a big company.
Insider trading.
Oh, it's fascinating.
What's going on there?
It's fascinating, right? So, I mean, if you have a look at, politicians always get a little inside scoop into what's happening. And,
yes.
And if you look at the writing on the wall, I just think you just couldn't be more bullish if you were positive about Bitcoin and you saw this guy who is in charge of the Sovereign Wealth Fund putting 40% of this huge company into Bitcoin, basically.
Incredible.
I wonder what he's going to do with the Sovereign Wealth Fund.
Yeah, that's right. Sounds interesting.
Yeah, very, very, very interesting.
It's like I heard Peter Dutton buying bank shares.
Interesting.
Just before there was that bailout for the banks.
Yeah.
So that's I heard that on the radio today. But look, I'm not an expert in politics, but I heard it on the radio.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yep.
Fascinating. Yeah. So do with that information what you will, but I just could say that this year is a very bullish year for Bitcoin. Still in the States, so over 20 US states now have a bill for a strategic Bitcoin reserve, where basically they just want to pump millions and millions and billions in some case into Bitcoin. They want to hold it for their state and their people, and they want to make their state wealthy.
Awesome.
It is getting really close in some states to being official.
Right.
Utah now just need to pass one more vote. So it's got to pass committees, it's got to get through houses, and Utah need one more vote, and then it's official, and they'll be the first state to pass a strategic Bitcoin reserve, which would be pretty wild.
Yep.
I feel like when one state goes, there'll be so many others that have to follow. Texas, the governor there is basically racing Utah. He said he wants to do it. It's his number one priority.
Okay.
But
I didn't know that.
But
yep.
I think Utah might be the first one.
Awesome.
Now it gets better. We move a little bit away from the States. In the last week, Abu Dhabi. So we move over and we have a sovereign wealth fund, the biggest sovereign wealth fund in the world. They have just announced too that they have bought $436 million worth of Bitcoin over there.
It's a drop in the ocean for those guys.
Well, it is, isn't it? So it's fascinating. So it's almost like a little test run.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there was rumors all year of big people in the UAE stacking Bitcoin, and then they've just released that yes, they in their sovereign wealth fund now is 436 million worth of Bitcoin.
That's nothing.
Which is actually pretty small for them.
It's a couple of biscuits.
Yeah, correct. But it just makes you wonder as they test the waters. Yep. It could be big things to come.
That's awesome.
Yeah, big things to come. The Czech president signed a law that eliminated capital gain taxes on any Bitcoin that is held for over a 3-year period.
Right.
This is really, really cool. I think this is, out of all the things that are happening, I think this could be one of the biggest things in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
If there are other governments that then follow suit, not only does it encourage people to, hang on, well, I need to look into this asset because if I hold it for more than 3 years, I don't have to pay any taxes on it.
Yep.
But then also, you've got this idea that, well, I should be hodling Bitcoin. It's not just buying it for a little bit and then quickly selling it. It's like, no, this is perfect money. It's got properties that no other asset has, and I can buy this thing and not pay any tax on it.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, pretty big news. News. The National Bank of Canada just announced that they bought $2 million worth of Bitcoin. So similar, I think, to in the UAE. It's a small start, but it's a start.
Just a little test.
Yeah, little test. And we've said on the podcast the banks will come. They got rid of SAB 121. We said that weeks ago, which just means that basically banks can buy Bitcoin. It's easier for them to do it. You might be able to leverage your Bitcoin. There's just going to be more options now.
Yep.
So I think the National Bank of Canada are just starting to test that out. So pretty awesome news. Now, MicroStrategy, who we talked about, they just purchased, literally 2 days ago, they've purchased $2 billion worth of Bitcoin, which takes them to 499,000 Bitcoin. So that's what they have
Poor
on
guys. Poor guys. Just short of 500,000.
Just short of 500.
Poor guys.
I did think that. I thought if you're buying $2 billion worth, wouldn't you just find another?
Just get a couple more.
Just another 1,000.
Get an even number. 500,000. 499's not right.
Yeah, it's just that little bit short of the 500,000. But yes, 1,000 Bitcoin. I couldn't tell you how much that would cost at the moment, but it'd be a lot of zeros. But they'll have that in no time. And they also changed their name, so they're no longer Micro. They're just Strategy.
Yep, I heard that.
Yeah, fascinating.
I like it.
Yeah, I do too.
The less words, the better.
That's right. And I think there's nothing micro about them anymore too. So
that's a good point.
They'll be leading the way for a long way to come.
Yep.
I'm going to come back to this one, but I wonder if you've heard about this. So Trump and Elon Musk declared that they're going to audit Fort Knox.
Haven't heard that. That's a new one.
So this is really, really interesting.
Right.
So gold is at an all-time high right now, and it continues to be at an all-time high. Last few months. Last few weeks, there's been this huge shortage in the UK, and there's been a record amount being shipped to the US. Now, that's a fact. Like, we can draw your own conclusions as to why that's happening.
Right.
But that is the fact. There's a huge shortage in the UK, record amounts being shipped to the US. We know that.
Yep.
The question is why and who. But there was a really interesting exchange with Elon Musk. Obviously, he's been running like the what's it called? The Doge, D-O-G-E. I don't know, how do you say it?
Yes.
But he's basically been just finding all the wasted spending and stopping it all. So he's trying to stop all the wasted spending, bring it all back to the American people, try and cut the debt. We've spoken about how crazy their debt is, 36 trillion. It just goes up so much. Every day it goes up so much.
Yeah.
But he's trying to cut it all back. And then someone said to him, hey, why are you doing all this great work? Why don't you go audit Fort Knox and just see if the gold's actually there? And he said, what do you mean? This doesn't get audited every year? And they said, no, it hasn't been audited properly for 50 years.
Oh, there we go. Here we go.
So, I mean...
Sounds like the Italian job.
100% right.
It's Italian, it's the American job. Yeah.
Dead set, right? So, I mean, you have a look at this crazy amount of like things that they've been spending money on. Money's gone missing. He found 4.7 trillion of untraceable money and no one knows where it's gone in one of these audits.
Wow.
What do you think they're doing with the gold over 50 years if no one's been looking?
I don't know. You'd have some pretty serious... jewelry being made, some gold chains, earrings. Something's going on with it.
Yeah, that's right.
The hip hop community's benefited from it.
Yes, yeah, 100%. No, 100%. So, look, I'm going to come back to that one because that's going to be part of my that's part of one of my other segments. Something I learnt this week, but I just thought it was. Hey, if he goes there and there's no gold, that's probably going to be the biggest story of our lifetime almost.
It'd be awesome.
It'll be crazy. It'll be absolutely wild. We come a little bit closer just to finish off the news. So we come back home into Australia. There's a man called Adam Hudson. You might even know him.
I've heard of Adam. I've heard of him.
Yeah, so he's
got the whitest teeth I've ever seen.
There you go. Do you actually know him, or you just heard?
I've been to one of his seminars. Actually.
Yeah.
That's
fascinating.
I don't tell many people that, except for the whole world. I just told now, but I generally keep that to myself. But yes, he's got the whitest teeth I've ever seen.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Salesman.
Absolutely brilliant. Well, he's selling his luxury apartment on the Gold Coast.
Right.
And guess what he wants for it?
Couple of Bitcoin.
Yeah, he wants Bitcoin.
Yep.
So his quote is, I love his quote here. So he said that it's no longer money for criminals or magic internet money. It's now a mainstream legitimate asset that has outperformed everything else almost every single year since its inception.
Wow.
So that's what he wants for his house. Now, the beachfront property was last sold for $6.25 million.
Right.
Probably wants more than that, and probably wants more than that in Bitcoin.
Mm.
So very interesting. I just find it's fascinating how it's just the way that it's slowly but surely integrating itself into society.
Yeah, the mainstream's becoming mainstream.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yep.
It is. It's becoming mainstream,
yep.
Which is exciting because it is, like I said, and we say every week, the properties of it are just incredible. Thanks so much for coming on, mate. Crazy news. I feel like every week there's just so much happening.
It's great news. Well done.
Yeah,
it's great to hear that stuff. Gee.
Well, it's not widely publicised like on your mainstream news.
Yes,
but it's all over. It's all over X. It's all over the independent news because it's fascinating, real world stuff that's happening. So but don't trust, verify. We always say that. It's a bit of a Bitcoin slogan, which I'll talk about a little bit later as well.
Mm.
As I said off the top, you have a very, very impressive resume.
Yes.
I'd love to hear, and obviously we're very grateful that you could come on with us today. We'd love to hear about your journey. So I guess, could you tell us about yourself? How did you start? What was that leap of faith you talked about at the start? And how did you get to where you are today?
That's a good question, George. Yes, it's been an interesting journey, definitely for me from an entrepreneurial kind of perspective. I think ever since I was a little kid, I always wanted to have my own business. So I think back to where my journey really began was as a little kid, and I'd always be, I was probably 11, 12, and I'd be sharing business ideas with my dad, and I'd say, "Hey, Dad, hey, I've got this great idea. Why don't we, I should sell icy poles. We'll do this, we'll do that." And my dad would always have this same response for me every time, which was, "Just finish your school, and then we could talk about that," right? So my dad was very big. Being a European and having not been able to, have an education himself, it was very big for him for his kids to get an education, and that was part of the dream of them coming to Australia, was that they were able to educate their kids or get their kids a good education. So my dad continually taught me that I just got to finish my schooling. And on one hand, that was good because it taught me to be grateful for the opportunity to get an education. Not everyone does.
Yeah. So you did finish your schooling?
I did, fortunately. But on the other hand, it kind of did also. I don't know. It was a bit negative too. It kind of planted the seed, like, you're dreaming with that stuff. You're hallucinating, thinking you can start a business, right?
Yeah.
You really need to just get an education, get a job like everybody else. So I kind of, as I got a bit older, I really started to, question that. And when I went to university for a while, and I had a car accident while I was at uni, which meant I had to defer. I was in my first year of studies, and I had to defer for about 6 months. And I don't know if it was a car accident or not, but it definitely got me thinking that obviously life is short.
Yeah.
It started making me think about there's got to be more to life, and more to life than just an education and getting a job. I'd always had that swimming around in my head anyway. And so part of it was going down a path of trying to find out what the meaning of life is, which led me to ultimately to discovering God and going to church, studying the Bible, and becoming a Christian, which is the greatest thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah.
But it also led me down a path of wanting to learn more and read books. So I started reading books, and one of the best books I read was Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Poor Dad, nice.
And that book, of all the self-help books and motivational books, that was the one that really struck a chord with me the most. And just the way he just told the story, the analogy of the two dads, the rich dad and the poor dad, and the poor dad was very much focused on working and earning a wage, a regular monthly wage, and that's what life is. Go to uni, get a good degree, and which sounded like my dad.
That's a lot of dads.
Yeah, but then the rich dad was very entrepreneurial. He owned businesses and started businesses and sold businesses. So that really struck a chord with me, and it got me thinking that, this is what I want to do with my life. I really want to be, without trying to sound arrogant, I'd rather be an employer than an employee. I just had that, that vision of being an employer, like hiring people rather than trying to be hired by somebody. So that just led me down a path of ultimately just having, always having that entrepreneurial spirit, always looking for new ideas and opportunities. And I ended up getting into the finance world. So I started working with Rene Rivkin, who's a very famous or infamous stockbroker in Sydney.
Yep.
So probably one of the best known stockbrokers, in Australia's history, actually. And
wow.
But I worked with his company, and it opened my eyes to the finance world and just how many people. I didn't realize how, I was working for his report, the Rivkin report, and I just didn't realize how many people were looking for information about trading. We were doing, at the time, like 1,000 subscriptions a week.
Wow.
So there was 1,000 new people coming on board every single week onto his report, and I was part of the sales team. But it just opened my eyes. I was like, I can't believe how many people really need help with trading or investing or are interested in investing in trading. So that was the first opportunity where I saw, wow, there's a huge market out there.
Yeah.
Rene Rivkin's report was good. But I saw there was an opportunity to do something a bit different. His report was based on fundamental analysis, and it came out once a week on a Monday. And a lot of the times, by the time people got the report and acted upon it, the stocks had actually already moved. Yeah. So we used to talk about in the office about, well, there's no one really doing a report with technical analysis, and there's no one doing a report that really allows that kind of targets or caters for the day traders, the people that are short-term traders. So, when we looked into it, we realised there was a gap there, and I started my own business called Australian Stock Report, which is that's where that company began. And we were the first ones to do a daily report. So there was a few other reports out there at the time, but ours was the first to be a daily report. So we published it every day. We used, obviously, technical analysis combined with fundamental analysis, and we targeted more short-term trading. And then we started offering options trading advice, and eventually it was CFDs when they became popular. And if I was still there and was still running it now, it would be trading crypto, because it's a huge market. But that's kind of where that business began, and I grew that business into, we had about 15,000 subscribers, and I sold that. It's about 14 years ago I sold out of that company.
Yeah.
So that was my kind of first success in business. I'd had other little projects that I'd worked on before that just didn't kind of work out, which is a typical entrepreneur story. But then from that, it afforded me the luxury to be able to look at investing in different projects. I pictured myself becoming like a Warren Buffett, the next Warren Buffett, and just becoming a big-time investor. So I did invest in a lot of startup companies after I exited Australian Stock Report. And unfortunately, that didn't go as well or to plan. So a lot of the projects I invested in were, great ideas and all positive businesses that did something positive for society or mankind or the world or the environment. But unfortunately, the projects, which is typical, which I found out is quite common in the venture capital space or the startup space, most of those businesses didn't succeed.
Wow. So you were on Shark Tank almost. You were the man.
Well, I was, but a very small version of that. And you could call it maybe not the Shark Tank, maybe like the goldfish tank or something like that. It was a small version of that, but yeah. But
the goldfish tank.
Yeah. Anyway, that's not a bad gag, that one. But I'll keep that one, Josh. But so that was my journey, and that's what I've been doing over the last 14, 15 years, is investing in different projects and then started a few projects again myself that, again, haven't gone as easy as I'd like, and I thought they'd all be a no-brainer, and I've got the Midas touch. No matter what I do, it turns that no, that wasn't the case.
Yep.
Business has been challenging at times, and has been it's been a grind, but that's what's brought me here, and I'm still doing that. I'm still running my own projects and still investing in other people's businesses. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a summary of me.
Oh, that's
Josh.
awesome. No, that's fascinating. Yeah, no, we really appreciate that for sure. There was a few things off the top that we said that you kind of went into. So with the Australian things, the Three Bearz Kids animation series, Quizopia, those sorts of things. How did you get into those?
So again, they're projects that I got involved in after selling out of my company and having a little bit of cash, a bit of liquidity there to work on things that I was a little bit more passionate about. So after I became a dad, which was back in 2007, my son was born. I ended up, I had a bit more, I was at home with him, had a bit more time on my hands, sold out of my company, and I ended up watching a lot of kids' cartoons, as you do as a young dad with a young son. And a lot of the cartoons I was watching, were great. Some of them were really entertaining, but a lot of them I thought that were on TV, I didn't think were that great. I didn't think they were that entertaining.
Yeah.
And it just, as an entrepreneur, I just said to myself, I wonder if I reckon I could do something myself. So that's where the Three Bearz, kids animation TV show idea came from.
Yeah. And how's that going today?
Well, it wasn't a great result with that, unfortunately, Josh. I learned some lessons in that industry, in that business. So we built it out. We created a trailer for it. We built out the idea of the show. We went to the US and pitched it.
Wow.
To producers and networks and agents. And unfortunately, someone liked the idea so much that they stole it from us.
Oh, no way.
So I don't know exactly who stole it. I couldn't pinpoint exactly who stole it in terms of the people that we'd met. But we probably needed to be a bit wiser about copywriting the idea and trademarking it and things like that, which I've done after that on projects that I'm working on now.
Yeah.
But that was a good lesson in business.
Yeah, wow.
And but that's a project that, that TV show, the show that ended up spinning off from our idea ended up being on TV for about 7 or 8 years and was quite successful. I won't mention the name now.
Okay.
I don't want to end up in a big legal battle.
Yeah, fair enough.
Cause too many issues.
Yeah.
Have your lawyers ringing us, Josh? Delete that episode.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right.
No, I'm fascinated. I'll ask you off air. That's very interesting.
No problems.
Very
Absolutely.
interesting. That's like I said. That's just fascinating. One thing I asked you before we came on this show. I thought, geez, it'd be interesting if you did own any Bitcoin, and you don't have to tell us how much or anything like that. But I said, Peter, do you own any Bitcoin?
Yes.
You do?
I do.
How did that come about?
Now, yes, so I was out buying Bitcoin at the height of the market back in probably, what are we talking now, just after just after COVID, really.
Yeah, it was pumping.
So-
Had this huge pump.
Yeah. Now, from memory, I think I was buying when it was trading at maybe 50,000 or
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
US dollars, maybe.
Yep. That sounds about right.
And I think from the time I purchased, it might have gone up for a couple of weeks and then literally went downhill and tanked all the way to whatever the lows were of 16,000 or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, wow, that's another successful trade that I've done there. What a gun trader I am.
But did you
yes.
hold any of it?
Well, I held some of it. I did
Nice.
sell
Okay.
some of the other stuff I had. I had some
Yeah.
other coins and
Okay.
little bits and pieces. I got a bit carried away with some of the other stuff.
Yeah.
But I did hold some of it, and I have also bought a little bit more on the way back up. But yes, so I do own some Bitcoin.
Yeah,
I'm
wow.
happy to say, thank goodness, I've got a little bit locked away.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, well done, well done. And if it's all right, like, how did you actually get into it? What made you think, oh, you know what? Have you researched it much, or was it more just, oh, this thing's pumping, I want to get involved, or were
Yeah.
you like, oh, what is Bitcoin?
Yeah, good. Yeah, good question. I think it's probably look, it started off again. Just I was actually a friend of mine who's a web developer and in the kind of technology space. Someone who I know and trust, and I've worked on a few projects together with. And he said to me, "Hey, you got to check out this Bitcoin stuff." And he had bought, I think maybe 6 months earlier,
Yeah.
and had ridden the wave up. And it seemed like you just couldn't lose. So he got me excited about it. He's like, this thing is just pumping. And I remember thinking to myself, it just sounds like a scam, you know?
Yeah.
Like, what is this thing, you know? And having come from a stock market kind of background or business where, you know, we were buying or offering advice on buying and selling shares in companies, in real companies, like shares. And, you know, a lot of it was, what does a company do and what product do they produce or what service do they provide and what profit do they make and what's the PE ratio and who's the management team? And, you know, they were the decisions that we would make on why we'd buy or sell a particular stock. And so when I looked at Bitcoin, I was like, what does this thing really do? I didn't quite understand it, but I kind of just went in following the fact that it felt like it was pumping. I was looking at the charts. So I went in, not with a lot of research. Since it pulled back, I started doing a little bit more research, and that's why I ended up holding on to it.
Nice.
Luckily, I started doing a bit more research and not just completely get out. So I still don't fully understand it, I'll be honest. It's not something that I could sit here and say I absolutely understand inside out the mechanics of it and exactly why it works. But I do understand it is an interesting digital asset, you know.
Yeah.
And I think and the fact that the world is starting to adopt it, as you mentioned in your intro, countries, states, large companies are starting to adopt it. It does give you a sense of, well, this could be something really here, right?
Yeah.
So I can see that I'm happy to be patient and hold on because there's probably too many other stocks that I should have got in on that I regret, like Google. I remember looking at Google when it was, you know, trading at $25 US, and I was like, it's expensive for a share. And or gold, you know, when gold was trading at $400 an ounce or $500 an ounce, and even then I was thinking that's expensive, but man, look at it now. So so I think Bitcoin could do something very similar, maybe even surpass all of that in terms of the returns. So anyway,
Yeah, well, I think I definitely agree with you. It's funny you mentioned the Rich Dad Poor Dad author, because I've seen a lot of articles where he would say the same thing. Where he's obviously looked into a lot of that stuff, and he's basically like, Bitcoin and gold are the two things that you should have as much as possible of. Which is really interesting.
That's right.
Yeah, wow. I was going to ask before, did you ever have a mentor or anyone that, like, where did this kind of drive come from?
That's a great question, and I think in terms of a business mentor, it's probably something that really I think I probably had people that I've worked with that were a bit older than me and a bit more successful than me as mentors, you know, in different projects. there's never been one person I could say has been my, my mentor that kind of held my hand from, start and is still working with me now. But it's something that I still would love to have is a really, is a mentor that I could continually bounce ideas off and things like that. But I had a partner. I've had a partner that worked with me in our venture capital company who was, he's about kind of 10, 15 years older than me, ex-investment banker, and just a really smart guy. He had a very incredible knack for feeling what the market was doing, and had a, he used to work in London and New York on trading desks, and he could just read the markets. He just had a really good sense of smelling where money was flowing and where it was going and flowing to. And he would trade government bonds and, fixed interest and all these, interesting kind of products. And so he was someone that I looked up to, and definitely helped me get a bit more of a macro view of what's happening in the world and how that, how the macro can determine what happens on the micro level as well. So, so he's been his name's Malcolm. I won't mention his last name in case he doesn't want to be mentioned, but maybe he doesn't want me to maybe he didn't want to be my mentor. So Malcolm is someone, but
nice.
I'm always looking for people to learn from and get advice from a business perspective for sure.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, that's awesome. I was gonna give you this before, but I didn't. But one of the new segments that I've got on the podcast is something you learned this week.
Right.
So
because
like you said before, like I don't understand Bitcoin fully. Like I still feel like I always call myself a pleb. I'm always trying to learn more and learn more and learn more and understand more. And the more I do learn and the more I do understand, it continues to, I guess there's a bit of a passion there. It's exciting. I definitely feel very bullish about its long-term future.
Right.
But something I learned this week, it doesn't have to be about Bitcoin. So I'll give you a minute just to, and it could be anything interesting that you learned this week. But for me, it was to do with the gold. So there was so much talk through the week about this gold, right? And how it's like, how can something that is like the backbone of American, the American economy. I mean, for those who don't know, like the government took the gold off the people, in the early 1900s, and they said, the people weren't allowed to hold it personally. They had to give it to the government. The government bought it off them, and then eventually they built Fort Knox, and then all the gold went into Fort Knox.
Right.
So, but it's like, how can this thing that like the American people had to give up, that the government paid for, that was like meant to be like, this is our backbone, how can it not be audited or verified or anything? And it was fascinating to me. And one of the big discussions was around how Bitcoin gets audited every 10 minutes.
Right.
Which was, I didn't know that. So I was like, that's fascinating. So it's open source, it's transparent. You can, anyone can go on and see that the Bitcoin's there.
Right.
It can never be, manipulated or moved in a way that it can be like stolen or duplicated or anything like that. It's It's there, it's on your ledger, and it is verifiable. And it then gets audited every 10 minutes to make sure that basically, it's secure. Everything that's happening is true and good.
Yep.
Gold, obviously, not audited for 50 years. So I thought that was fascinating. It was just something that
That's a good point.
I
well, I did not know that Bitcoin, I didn't know those two things. That gold hasn't been audited for 50 years and Bitcoin gets audited every 10 minutes. So that's a good point to make. Yeah, I didn't know that. So that's good. Yeah.
Did you learn anything interesting this week?
I think this week when I was looking at the price of Bitcoin in particular, and I just saw it got belted this week. I was like, what is going on? And I was actually going, just very simply, in a layman's way, just going through Google and what's happening, why is Bitcoin going down at the moment? And the only thing that I could find that interesting was the fact that there'd been the biggest heist in crypto happen
Yeah,
this week.
fascinating.
So
yeah, so true.
the one was it $1.4 billion
Yep.
worth of I believe it's Ethereum,
Yeah,
right?
it was,
From
yeah.
what was the platform? It slipped my mind. What's the
yeah.
name of the platform? I should
I
have known
should look
this.
this up, but yeah.
I didn't know
we'll
you were going to
find
ask
it.
me this question as well, though, Josh. So I'll put you on the
That's
spot too.
You
But
did. I do know. I think it was it was Binance or Bit something.
yeah, it wasn't Binance, but
No, okay.
but yes, I couldn't believe that much
Yeah.
crypto, that much Ethereum had been stolen.
Yeah.
I know there's been big heists in the past, but
Yeah.
wow, I would have thought these platforms
Yeah.
would be absolutely bulletproof.
Yeah. You'd
Um,
think so. Yeah.
And I remember it reminds me of when I was in Hawaii. This is a bit of a side story, but it kind of ties into it. But I was in Hawaii maybe 10 years ago with my wife and kids, and we were staying at this. It was a fairly nice hotel, but there was a guy there that just looked like he was oozing with money. You know, when you can just tell someone, someone's just
rich.
so rich.
Yeah.
I think he just had this big smile on his face the whole time. There's like nothing could ever harm him. He had a force shield around him.
Yeah.
He was the happiest guy in the world, smiling, grinning, sipping on a pina colada or something like that.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, I just said, mate, what do you do? What do you do for a living, buddy? You know? And he was an American guy, actually a Canadian guy, and he said, I'm a hacker, right? I said, oh, really?
Oh, no
Really?
way.
You're a hacker, right?
No
I'm
way.
like, yeah, well, tell me, how does that work, mate? And he goes, well, I get employed by companies
Yeah.
to hack into their systems to find the weaknesses, the gaps, the flaws, the holes in their code, in their system.
Yeah.
So then I can highlight it to the company and then provide a solution as to plug those holes so somebody else can't do it, right?
Wow.
So and that was like 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And he was telling me, I said, man, do a lot of people do that? That's a pretty cool job, right?
Yeah.
And he said, he goes, when I first started, there was like 30 of us around the world. And he goes, and now we have a conference once a year in Vegas, and we fill up two full hotels. There's like 10,000 of us at a conference every year in Vegas. And I was like, wow, that's incredible, right? So obviously a growth industry, being a hacker, but cybersecurity is huge. You're hearing about it with banks and insurance companies being hacked into all the time.
Yeah.
But I would have thought, man, if you're a Bitcoin, a crypto exchange, like where you are literally holding billions of dollars worth of assets, digital assets, man, you got to protect that, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, they need to hire my Canadian buddy, right? They needed to hire him. But the point is,
That's so true.
so I just didn't realize I learned this week that, man, I think that's obviously spooked a few people is how quickly potentially exchanges can be hacked into.
Yeah.
I read that as a result of that, a lot of people sold.
Yep.
So they sold out thinking, oh man, I better protect my assets here. I better sell, convert back into cash or whatever it is. So yeah, that was mind blowing.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
And $1.4 billion, right?
Yeah. That's absolutely fascinating.
It's got to be, I think it is the biggest theft ever, right? Has
Yeah.
anyone ever stolen more than that, right?
True. Yeah.
Anyway, so I learned that this week.
No, I'm so glad you brought that up. There's two really interesting things that come to mind when you talk about that.
Yep.
So the first one is that my number one thing that I would say to people with Bitcoin is self-custody.
Yes.
So that can never happen.
Right.
So learn how to do it properly.
So you're saying
Put in
never leave it on the exchange, never let it sitting there.
It depends how much.
Right.
Like if it's anything significant,
Right.
then definitely. Like if it's significant to you,
Yes.
then you should own it yourself.
Gotcha.
And you should have it in your own custody, and then that can never happen.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I think that's a really good lesson for everyone.
Yep.
Do the research in how you do that. I think we spoke about that a bit on episode 2 or 3, just in terms of like how to go about that. So
Right.
do a little test run first. Don't just send all of it at once.
Yep.
Do some research in how you want to do that.
Yep.
The second thing that's really interesting to me, because I've been doing a lot of research lately into some other crypto in terms of just properties versus Bitcoin. Like we'll look to do an episode soon, Bitcoin versus other crypto, and probably
Yes.
trying to look into it. Ethereum, when that happened, there was people high up basically who have some sort of control over it,
Right.
who were debating whether they just cancel the transaction or something.
Right.
Like, to the point where, like, they could actually, basically, they can manipulate things and control things with Ethereum, which I didn't know was possible.
That's a bit scary.
It is scary.
Right.
So, yeah, there was, I think
And
they
you
were going to
would've-
have a vote, or they were going to do something. I was looking into that the other day, and I was like, this is really, because there's a lot of people that say this kind of just proves
Yes.
that Ethereum is centralized rubbish, basically, is what
Right.
they were saying.
Right.
Is that the fact that this can get stolen, but then, so it's moved, so it's there, but then you're somehow going to just rewrite this, this ledger, or rewrite this thing where someone has the ability to do that.
Yeah.
It's another lesson where Bitcoin's the only thing that's not controlled. It can't be manipulated. It's decentralized, where these other things are not.
Right.
So that was I just thought that was really,
fascinating.
really interesting.
Yeah, that is
when
that is
happened.
interesting.
Yeah.
And you would have thought if they could see that this transaction was occurring, yeah, maybe just, you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? Someone's
Someone's
transfers.
stolen
Yes.
1.4 billion.
Some guy called Tony, Tony X is, he's transferring the money to the Bahamas. Maybe should we look into it?
Yeah.
Is this a legitimate transaction?
Yeah.
Maybe let's cancel it.
Yes.
Maybe call someone.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that. That's interesting. Yeah, Josh. Yeah.
No,
Yep.
I'm very glad you brought that up. Now, not to put any pressure on you here,
Yes, sir.
but just to finish up,
Yes.
is there? So I haven't. There's two things I haven't mentioned yet in my research of you over this week.
Right.
So one is you've got a very good stand-up comedian kind of reviews.
Ooh.
So apparently
You're digging deep here.
apparently you've done a bit of work in comedy as well. I don't know how
Yes.
you've had time for that
It-
with everything else that you've done.
Yes.
But is that true?
That is true.
That
That
is
is
true?
true. Very unsuccessful stand-up comedian, but
Okay,
I gave
okay.
that a go. Actually, yes.
Yeah. I did see a page where you must have created it, where you said a whole host of things, and it was very funny. And then you said, been married for 26 years, and I think my wife's been happily married for 10 of those 26
Yeah,
years.
that's about that's about right. Yes,
That's true.
yeah, the first 10, I think. Maybe the middle 10.
Maybe-
Yeah,
okay.
but yeah, yes.
No, I thought that was brilliant. Now there's no pressure here, but is there a go-to story or gag as a comedian that you had that you could rip off to finish this off here?
Oh, you're really throwing me.
I'm putting you in the deep end.
Throwing me under the bus on this one, Josh. Well, yes, I did do a bit of stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
And I did it until I realised I wasn't going to really make any money from this. So I had a bit of an awakening.
Yeah.
I think when I was standing in a sleazy pub one night, going, I can't really see myself paying the bills here when I could even buy myself a Coke, right? And actually, the club wouldn't even buy me a free Coke.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, no, but but my comedy was, I used to talk about society. Being quite negative, and I was, a bit, saddened by that, how negative society was, and I just gave examples of things like, I was driving down the freeway one day, just minding my own business, and I looked up and I saw a street sign that said, "Wrong way, go back." And I thought, gee, that's pretty negative, isn't it? I thought, can't they be a little bit more uplifting, a bit more positive? I mean, couldn't they have said something like, "Wrong way, but you can give it a go. Have a try."
Peter, thank you so much for coming on. I've had an absolute
pleasure.
blast. You've got a fascinating story, and
Thanks, mate.
yeah, really, really appreciate you coming on. So
Thanks, Josh.
thanks so much, mate.
Appreciate it, buddy. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. All right, we'll see you next time on the Bitcoin Brothers Australia podcast. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. See you next time.
See you next time.